Hi, welcome to another edition of 1 in 15. As ever, I'm going to get my guests to introduce themselves.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Joy Madeiros and I work for Oasis. I've been with Oasis for too many years, probably 20 years plus. And my Oasis is structured as a group of organisations, and my job is to look after the group. So I get to be called Global CEO, but I much prefer being called Joy.
Brilliant. Well, Joy, it's a pleasure, genuine pleasure to have you today. As you know, the series of interviews is basically trying to wrestle with these big things that we've got. So tell me one big thing that's been dominating your thinking lately.
Yes, well, I think, lots of big things, obviously, because there's lots of things going on.
Sure.
But I think the thing that I've been aware of, that in a sense is, it was always there before, but has been made much more stark, has been revealed, as much more intensified, if you like, is that the extent to which some of our families in Oasis, and I'm thinking particularly of our families and communities where we work across the UK, but also across the rest of the world, is because of COVID, what it's revealed is just the extent of what I'd call food poverty. So many of our families haven't got enough to eat,
Sure.
simply do not get enough to eat during the week. Our children, we made a big fight to make sure that they continued to be fed with food vouchers, the use of food vouchers, which we managed to get the government to turn around its approach on. So the big issue of food, and it hasn't gone away. I mean, even this morning, as I'm talking to you, a big commitment from the government that they need to do something about ensuring that everyone's on universal credit, not just a certain proportion of them, that all those families get access to food and decent food. So there's a whole issue about food, which has been revealed as a big issue. I think the other issue is around safety, and how many of our families through this time have not been safe. Our cases of abuse have increased, I'd say, in terms of data, the ones we can record, by about 25%, but it's probably a lot more than that. And we're expecting that our children will come back to school to some extent traumatized. We know that through our summer sessions that we've run in our communities, where we've anticipated that we would have certain numbers and those numbers haven't turned up, it's because the children and the parents are frightened about re-engaging and mixing. That's just the COVID issue. That's not the safety issues that are going on at home. So there's an awful lot that we know we're going to have to deal with at the beginning of September. So food and safety. And another massive poverty issue that we've obviously encountered in our schools is the fact that so many of our children obviously do not have the access to the internet that most other children do. If they've got access, they'll have a phone, but that's not the same as having access to a laptop and being able to do their schoolwork at home. That's been a huge issue, and is an issue for the education sector in its entirety, of course.
And I mean, you're right. I mean, that certainly counts as a big thing, and there's complex parts of that, some of which we mentioned, some of which we haven't, had time or space to do. I'm really fascinated by this. Obviously, my experience as both a coach and a youth worker, I've seen that kind of the way that one form of poverty affects other forms of poverty. Really conscious. As you know, I've got 3 daughters. We bought them a laptop each at Christmas. It was just something that we no kind of foresight of what was going to happen. Just fortunate in that respect. Then that meant that when they've been here and they've been doing their homeworking for school, they've all had a resource to use. So the internet is a bit dodgy every now and again, but that's been the only problem they've kind of wrestled with. Really conscious of some of their friends who, maybe there might only be one phone for the whole household, and dad needs it and mum needs it as well as the kids, and that kind of trauma. We're fully aware, aren't we? All too aware that there's a whole swathe of children who are going to be going back to school having effectively had no engagement with education for 6 to 8 months by the time they return. So how can organisations like Oasis, wrestle with that reality?
Yes, well, we certainly did wrestle with it, and I think the great thing for Oasis through this time has been what I'd call the way we are structured in order to allow us to respond. So I think we've been positioned particularly well, and that sounds self-aggrandizing. I don't mean it to sound like that. It's just the way we are structured has meant that we've been able to respond to the needs of communities because we are there. You know, we don't kind of run into a community and deliver and then run back out again. Obviously our schools are there throughout the whole of the term, and many of the people who work in schools carry on as they did through this time, being there throughout the rest of the time. And obviously our workers who are working in the community projects, the school and the community projects together in Oasis terms makes up the hub. And we are, if you like, working very hard to be incarnate somebody's just come in to offer me a cup of tea, but they've gone away again. To be actually present in a community, and I think that's made a massive difference. So that's meant that we've been able to, as we are now in the summer holidays, carry on providing support for our communities, the children, when, you know, our experience is that very few other community agencies are able to do that. Now there'll be different reasons for that, but we've got sufficient infrastructure both at the national level and the local level to allow us to be able to do that. That's because of the way we're set up, and so we have what we call our national services, obviously working at a national level, but we've got our frontline, our people are in community, and that's allowed us to respond, and that's been a great privilege. It's been a stretch, it really has, but it's meant that we've known what is going on and what is needed on the ground.
Sure. And that's one of the real challenges I know in community work from my own experience as well, that kind of quite often the people with the greatest need are the people who struggle the most to access any resources that do exist. They may not know they're there, or they may have real legitimate reasons why they can't get it, or they may have fears about accessing it. You know, I'm thinking of, as you say, some of those kind of vulnerable families for whom, you know, they may be shielding out of fear rather than any kind of real medical evidence, because you know, if they're in food poverty, then their bodies have got less resistance to illness anyway. You know, maybe their sleep patterns aren't as healthy, maybe they can't.
And there's different languages, and the support is not written in their language, and they don't understand the system. There's all of those things. That's right.
So that's a real challenge for community groups such as yourselves, and it's the asset that you bring as well, because as you say, you are in the community, so you've got more chance of identifying and communicating with those people. But we still know that there's always some kind of beyond that reach, aren't there? What kind of strategies are you considering, or have you adopted as an organisation to try and find those people and give them the resources that they need?
Well, we've made ourselves very, we've made our presence known, if you like. So we've not gone away, and we've continued to provide. So what I suppose we did right at the beginning of COVID was we brought the community projects that would be working around the academy, around the school. Sometimes they would be, you know, if you like, in normal times, they'd be working in the school and outside of the school. So they'd be working with the community, the wider community, and then from time to time they'd be actually in the school. What we did was we brought the community teams right inside and asked them to support, so that you had then the value of the teaching staff and the community teams working together, and if you like, the strengths combined, working into the communities together in order to respond. So you know, when it came to Easter holidays and during the summer, the early part of the summer holidays, the benefit, for example, from an Oasis point of view, is that our community teams could have access to our kitchens in the schools. They can then develop their food parcels from there, and those food parcels would then go to those families in the school that needed them there, but also beyond. So it was about joining forces and responding. But I think, you know, that's an immediate response and an emergency response. I think the issue now is how we, you know, in terms of working forward, is how we take the model and we can build on that model, because what is not, everybody knows that local authorities are skint, and that everybody also knows that community work is the bit that would be not funded, you know, or would lose its funding first. And we know that has already happened. We also know that the relationship between the local authority and national government is limited. And even if there was funding there, the way in which our country works is in silos. So the health department works with their GPs. They don't just work with GPs, but education works with schools. Justice works with those people who are working on all of the issues to do with crime and all the rest of it. What they don't do is work together, because the machine is too big and there's too much human kind of, this is my territory, it's not your territory, get off, leave me alone, this is our budget, this is not your budget, and the rest of it. And we all know what that means at a local level. And with fewer and fewer resources available at the local authority level, there is less and less integration. And we feel the impact of that in community on the ground, don't we? So you come back to not only the families not knowing which way to go, but actually those people who are working at a community level don't know whether or not they should go to that department, or even within the departments don't know what's going on. So there's a huge need for integration as a result of all of this. The key model of Oasis is what we call the hub. And for the easiest way to describe that is it looks like a pizza with slices.
Sure.
The idea is that all those slices work together. They've all got the same toppings and the same ingredients, but they all do something slightly different. So one slice or two slices might be the school, and another slice might be youth work, and another slice might be family work, and another slice might be health support, and all the rest of it. And we try to work in an integrated way, in order that those who benefit from the hub don't experience what I've just explained, which is I've no idea what I'm doing and where I'm going and where I can get help from. And I think that, when I said earlier on that I think we've been well positioned, we are in community, but also we are joined up. And that's your question to me, what's been your strategy? The answer is being joined up. And I think we've got to, I think people recognise the value of that. We've been asked in many places where we work, can we learn from this? How can you help us with this model? And I think it's what we've got to do is do what everybody needs us to do to evaluate it. Very hard to evaluate it all.
It's especially hard, isn't it? I'm conscious that we're almost out of time. 50 minutes goes quickly. But it's really hard to evaluate on the go, isn't it? That's one of the things that organisations have to get good at. What I'm really struck by is, as a community worker myself, as a coach, what you've been talking about is kind of integrative well-being and wellness. Actually, is this kind of joined up thinking that we instinctively know is the best way forward, but often struggle for all kinds of reasons to adopt and adapt into our practice. And I think one of the things that I've always liked about organisations like Oasis is this intentionality. You don't live in a space where you're pretending that you're doing everything perfectly or that everything's easy and fine, but there's an intentionality there of saying, how can we make sure that each part of the body, to use that kind of biblical metaphor of community, knows at least what the function of the other part is? How can we work out so that they know roughly what's going on? And there's an openness of communication, kind of breaking down those territories that you've identified, those silos, that kind of instinctive protectionism that we're all guilty of slipping into from time to time. But, I think sorry, go on. Well, just going to have a whole community response where we're not having to individually solve the problem, because we're working together with other people who are trying to solve it as well.
I totally agree. I think a recognition that it's messy, it's not going to be perfect. That's a really important thing. That when there's a problem, it's not the computer says no as well. So it's two things. One is recognize that this is a messy way of working, and you have to be committed to communication. You have to be committed to sitting down, talking things through when things go wrong, because they inevitably will when you're trying to work national, local, and then work across a whole series of functions locally. And then not do what service delivery organisations tend to do, which is you get to the end of a endless phone call and then eventually say, oh no, we really can't help you, sorry, goodbye. And you think, actually, it's got to be, okay, so we see that problem, let's go and see whether or not we can actually sort it out, and be committed to the individual situation, even though you feel this is one circumstance in 1,000, but it's worth investing in that one circumstance, because it might tell you about the rest of the 999.
Exactly. And I mean, it's the old kind of adage, you can only do what's in front of you anyway.
Yeah.
And obviously as a community organisation, there's a load of things in front of you, more than
Yeah.
there would be for an individual.
Yeah.
But that means that you've got more chance of making a greater impact, recognising where you can't presently make an impact and working towards trying to fill those gaps. Joy, we are out of time. That's amazing. I've really enjoyed, really energized. Like, I recognize the tension. If I had a hat, I would take it off to you for the amount of work you're having to put in, you know, trying to deal with the poverties that we recognize and the structural, both ability and inability, I guess, to respond to it. Joy Madeiros, you've been a fantastic guest.
No, thank you, Andy. Brilliant idea. So keep going. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.